Villainous by its_Kingston on AO3. Episode 26. Chapter 17. Past. Did. Her words were soft and lacking confidence or any previously held venom. Did they tell you about me? She sounded like a child, a lost one, scared, almost. About you, UA or the League? The League. About my past. Why I hate heroes? No. I guess the trouble started 19 years ago. I was born. She chuckled, although there was no humor to it. But it wouldn't seem so bad until high school. Or maybe it all went to shit when I was 6. Ma'am, sir, your daughter is perfectly healthy. She had a quirk, and it's already manifested. See this little joint here? This shows us that there is a quirk present, although it cannot tell us what it is. The doctor said. He flipped through a clipboard as he spoke. A 4-year-old Toga was busy, staring at the floor and kicking her feet, as she sat at the edge of the room's examination table. Then is there a reason why we haven't seen any evidence of her quirk? Her father, a man of average height and equally average IQ, asked. A lot of quirks need time to develop further, or only come out in certain circumstances. There might be a required necessity to fulfill before it activates. A lot of people are like that. He added the last part reassuringly, though Toga's parents still exchanged worried glances. Are you going to become a hero when your quirk shows up? The doctor asked Toga, who didn't bother responding. The doctor curiously looked at the girl's parents, observing the annoyed look from her father. Oh, sorry. She's always like this. Her mother apologized, frowning her brow at her daughter. It was her 6th birthday when she first discovered the beginnings of her quirk. She had a party, but didn't like the attention from the older guests her parents invited. A lot of the other children her age saw her as strange, so she had no reason to talk to them either. No use trying to convince a bully not to be mean, she reasoned. So she stepped out of her parents' house and went off to play by herself. Wandering to the edge of the property, she came upon a forest. She'd never been allowed to go back there, but today seemed like a good chance to try. She was older after all. After looking around for some fun, she found a sturdy tree, although most all trees were sturdy to 6-year-olds, and she began climbing it. She saw a bird's nest when she was several feet off the ground and admired it carefully. Suddenly, a large bird swooped in, guarding the eggs with vigor. It crawled at Toga, startling the girl and sending her spiraling backwards off the tree. She landed on her back with a solid thump, yet no one came to check on her. She doubted they heard or cared. The palm of her right hand stung, and lifting it revealed a cut that a rock had left it. It wasn't bleeding bad, a light trickle at best. She probably wouldn't even need a bandage. She stared at the cut for a moment, observing it in the light. To any bystander, this looked like a 6-year-old examining a cut before going to show her parents. But it was something else entirely to Toga. She watched it with interest, fascinated with the way the red stained down her wrist and began traveling down her forearm. It slowed down substantially, more into a crawl than a trickle, due to the wound's clotting. She furrowed her brow and got back up, still having been on the ground. She was looking for a rock now, one similar to the one that cut her. Finding it, she sat down beneath the tree, out of sight of anyone, not minding their own business. She flipped it around in her left hand, the one without the cut. Turning her right palm to the ground, she traced the rock across the back of the hand. Once her course of action was decided, she acted on it. Pressing the sharpest edge of the rock down, she traced a line on the back of her hand, drawing a thin layer of blood as she did. Smiling at the reaction, she pressed a little harder. More spilled out. Not so much so to cause an issue. She was smarter than that, but enough to observe as it cascaded down her arm. There was something soothing about it, calming in a way nothing else in her life was. It eventually came to a stop, with the trickle of blood reaching almost past her elbow. She laughed lightly to herself and moved to the rock to her right hand. The cut stung a little as she gripped the rock, but she ignored it in favor of marking up her other hand. She cut a line across her palm, and watched as the same thing happened again. A red path leading down her wrist, making its way to her elbow. This time was different, though. She felt a tug, a pull in her stomach, like it was a strange feeling, but felt almost as if her body was guiding her brain. Or maybe helping itself? She raised her hand closer to her face, and felt the pull all that much more stronger. This is what it wanted her to do. She was positive now. So instead of watching the blood run down her arm, watching the droplets fall into the grass when it reached the end, she ran her tongue across the palm, tasting the red that she so curiously watched. It was different, but not in a bad way, more of an unusual way. The way where you needed a second taste to confirm whether or not you actually liked it. So that's what she did. Adding another fresh cut to her arm, she tasted it again. It was still an undiscernible taste, like metal, sure, but something else. A thought crossed her mind, and despite its nature, she wasn't startled by the idea. It felt natural. She stood up, wiping the streaks of blood onto her clothes, and turned to the tree. The bird's nest stood proudly, with its defender eyeing Toga suspiciously. She giggled at the bird, before finding her footing and beginning up the tree once again. Her hands burned with a pain that made her eyes water, but she didn't mind. She could still see. All she wanted was to test this, to see if she was right. The bird crawled in warning as Toga approached, but its cries fell on deaf ears as she continued nearing the nest. The black bird crowed again, hopping onto the edge of the nest, standing between the eggs and Toga. There was no worry to her. She didn't want the nest, or the eggs. Balancing herself on the branches beside the nest, she reached out and quickly grabbed the bird in her hands. One around its neck, to keep it from pecking her. The other around its wings to stop it from trying to fly away. She was only a little unsure of what to do next, though felt her subconscious knew exactly. She'd been born with rather sharp teeth, something she'd often hear her parents call unsettling, or on occasion, freakish. It never bothered her. She learned from a very young age, younger than she was now, that most of everyone was mean. That no one liked someone who wasn't like them. That was alright, even though she was a social butterfly. That was okay. It gave her more time, more opportunities to do stuff like this. After all, wouldn't another person only stop her, only get in her way? The bird had been thrashing about, struggling, and crowing out. Toga, annoyed by the bird's insistent cries, tightened her grip around its neck. It didn't stop moving, but the noises were choked and muffled. She slowly moved her hands, creating a space between them. It was around wing level. It cleared back space for her to bite into. She had flipped the bird around, angling it so she wouldn't bite down on its wings, only the softer, squishier parts. With nothing left to do, Toga lifted her bird to her mouth and bit it hard. It squalled out in pain and wiggled out more, yet it didn't die. She took a sip, much more than she previously gotten, sampling her own blood. She swallowed and leaned away from the bird, thinking. She felt something she couldn't quite start to change, and felt as though she needed more fuel for this growing fire. The bird was dead and drained within minutes, and Toga placed it back into its nest before climbing down. She was aware of the smudges that stained the side of her mouth and wiped them away with the back of her left hand. The cuts didn't burn any longer, having started to scrape up. She walked for almost an hour, searching for another bird's nest. As she looked, she began realizing small things. Looking up in the sunny patches around the woods mirrored a more painful than usual reaction. She rubbed her eyes, curious as to why the light had suddenly gotten so much brighter. A side effect, she wondered. She was too young and carefree to notice the beginnings of her quirk, though she learned so quickly enough. A white bird chirped happily in its nest, which was only a few feet off the ground. Toga grinned and headed towards the noise, arriving at the base of the small tree. She grabbed the thickest branch and hoisted herself up, already almost at the bird's level. "You're a silly bird, building your house so low." Toga laughed, pulling herself to sit on the same branch as the nest. The white bird stopped chirping. Instead, it hopped towards Toga. It cawed, flapping its wings to make itself look bigger. Toga smiled and lunged forward to grab the bird. She did successfully, but unfortunately tumbled off the branch while doing so. She landed on the ground, still keeping her grip on the bird. It crawled wildly on her hands, trying to free itself from her grasp. It pecked the side of her finger once before she tightened her hold and got up. She hadn't injured herself landing and was actually having quite a bit of fun. This was her favorite birthday yet, she supposed. She turned the bird around and quickly bit into its side. She took a few greedy sips before pulling back, feeling something on the back of her forearm. A small, white feather must have fallen off the bird, as it landed delicately on her arm. She took one hand off the glazed bird and tried to push it off, but it remained there. She grabbed it between her fingers and lifted it. But it's surprising to find that it was hard to pull. Rather confused and anxious, she wiggled it away and was amazed at the way it melted and slid off her. She felt stronger, like this was what she was born to do, and tried again. Another sip sometimes gave a feather, sometimes it didn't. She wondered if the same thing worked on other animals, or better yet, people. But she didn't want to try to push her luck. She still held the half-dead bird as she began running back to her house. Her parents would probably be happy to see that this was her quirk. She imagined they'd be so happy for her, and they'd stop being mean to her, and they'll believe in her. She grinned as she ran up the back porch, and hair bouncing all over her shoulders as she made her way back to the door. "Mom, Dad, I think I found my quirk," she called, running inside. "Really? That's great, dear," her mom said from the couch, the next room over. "Yeah, come on, kiddo, show us," her dad said happily. She was right. They were so excited for her. She ran into the living room, the bloodied bird still in her clutches. What? Her mom was startled by the display. Her daughter stood there, clothing splattered with blood and dirt, her mouth stained with red. She gripped a no longer white bird tightly, grinning at it. Toga bit down on the bird, as she'd done many times that morning, sipping its blood quickly. A feather shot on her arm, and she held it out proudly. "Look, I've got a feather now, and watch, I can make it disappear," Toga said, giggling, as she turned to coo and slid it off her arm. The wet sound it made when hitting the wooden floor was the only noise for a while. Toga stood happily, waiting for her parents to clap, to tell her that she was incredible, or maybe just to say, "Good work, kid," and resume whatever they were doing. She got none of those things. Instead, she was brought back into the real world by a slapping, stinging at the side of her face. She dropped the bird, and it twitched on the floor, where it would probably die. "You monster! Why would you do that to the poor animal?" her mom yelled. She was staring daggers into the girl, who didn't answer back. "Hey, speak up when your mother talks to you," her father, still poised to hit her once more, shouted at her. She didn't move yet again, and he grabbed her by the wrist. "Hey!" "Let me go!" she cried, breaking down into a sob. Her face hurt. The world was too bright, and her head was spinning with the new reality she was faced with. Her parents called her a freak. At least, it was behind her back. Now, her mother looked dead into her eyes and called her a monster. This wasn't right. "Go to your room. I don't want to see you again for a long time. Think about what you've done," her mother yelled again, and Toga followed her instructions, holding her hand to her side of her face as she ran up the stairs. She stopped at the bathroom to look at her reflection. Her mouth was dotted with streaks of blood, her eyes red with falling tears. A red handprint had raised on the side of her face, and would probably bruise too. She dreaded her parents' overlapping chattering, and while hoping for the best, she only expected the worst. Alright, strap down, bitches. Okay, today I'm not going to talk about what happened in the chapter. I mean, that was actually a good depiction of what Toga's quirk manifesting would be, because Toga's quirk manifesting, all we know is that she bit into a bird, and that most likely her parents did not accept her. What happened in middle school and how she killed that kid, or attempted to kill that kid. I don't know. Stuff like that where it's like, okay, we vaguely know what happened, but we don't know what happened, right? And, you know, there's multiple theories. Some people think that Toga is the elder sister of, what was his name? What was that bitch name? God, the blonde one with blue eyes. Copycat. No, Monima. There you go. I think. No? Monima? I think it is Monima. Okay, whatever. Different people believe her backstory to be slightly different. Little variations here and there. This one is one that I really love. I really love the depiction of Toga here, and how in her instincts it's like, okay, I need to do this. It's my instincts, it's her quirk calling out to her, right? As someone who has an OC who is similar to Toga in the sense of blood, except she literally needs blood to live. I know that some people depict Toga as needing blood to live, like a vampire type, and other people depict her differently, and it varies and whatever. My OC very much needs and depends on blood. It's a My Hero Academia OC, right? And I love the depiction of Toga in certain fan fictions, right? Because I like to think that Toga, if in the right environment, would have thrived, especially in My Hero Academia main. I mean, Toga as a character as a whole is a very tragic character, right? I mean, think about it. Her whole arc in the beginning, right? You think of her like, oh my god, just like another Harley Quinn, haha, hee, right? And then if you view deeply, right, you could subtract deeper meanings behind it. Is it me pulling shit out of my ass and trying to really grasp at straws and mostly getting all of this from fanfiction? Yes, because Horikoshi can be a shitty writer, especially when it comes to villains sometimes. I think the only villains that he really I feel like he had promising characters, but he never utilized them, right? He never utilized them. He was good at first impressions and getting the essence of the character out. But when it came to actually fulfilling the character's purpose, the character as a whole, it fumbles the bag. The only reason characters seem to be not two-dimensional as they actually are in the show is because fans, you guys, like it's / Kingston. Yes, I'm looking at you, Kingston. I'm gonna make you cry again because I'm about to shout some positive shit, right? Like fans and people who write stories, right? Specifically fanfic writers, fans and those who create comics and, visual comics for TikTok, Instagram, whatever, right? Like y'all, you do a great job at picking up with what Horikoshi put, right? The essence of the character, like, hey, this is the essence of the character. These are little foundations. These are a little bit of a backstory. You get like a two-dimensional character here who has a lot of potential. You grab the potential and you mold it into something that's great. I think that's the only thing I like about My Hero Academia main. That it's so shit to the point where we could fix it, I mean, like, I don't say that it's shit. I know there's some people who are like, oh my god, My Hero Academia is so good, like, blah, 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 why are you hating on it? As a writer, right, I love the show. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's a shit-ass show. It's a good, enjoyable show, but the second you turn on your brain, you realize how much lost potential there is. Toga is one of those lost potential characters. I feel like her arc, especially spoilers for the manga, and upcoming season 7, towards the end where she ultimately made the big sacrifice to give all her blood to Uraraka, right? And that whole arc with Toga and Uraraka, which by the way is so gay, she was underutilized as a whole. I mean, Toga is a very, fundamentally, I mean, in the show, she's a very two-dimensional character, right? Think of her as like a Harley Quinn, a psycho, you know, teen who is obsessed with cute stuff, right? And then season 6, we get a little bit more two-dimensional with her, you know, where she is like, okay, well, would a hero kill me? You know, because I'm a villain, do I not deserve to be saved? Kind of mindset, right? And then from there, you get into her whole thing. But, like, imagine if she was fully diverse. Imagine if, like, throughout the whole thing, we would... Look, if I were to rewrite My Hero Academia, I would... Because I love all these characters so much, if I were to rewrite My Hero Academia, I would probably make it a whole series in AO3, right? A whole series, and I would individually go by each character that I, you know, appreciate. Like, there would be, like, a fic for, like, obviously there would not be, like, a whole fic for Toga, right? But there would be a whole fic for Toga and Uraraka, right? And then adding some of the League members in there. Like, I feel like Twice would be a good added there, right? Then there would be a whole chapter for Todoroki, Dabi, and, the character. Basically, I would do sections where, yes, the whole fic, you can read each section individually without having to read the rest of the series, but you could read it all together. And if you wanted to read it in chronological order, you would have to go, you know, chapter by chapter by chapter, like be like, okay, I have to read this fic, chapter 1 through 5, and then I have to jump to this fic, and then do chapter 1 through 6, and, you know, stuff like that, right? But moving on from that, like, Toga as a whole character, I feel like, as I've mentioned before, fundamentally, she's a character who is driven by love. She wants to be accepted. But if we go into a deeper level, because I mentioned this before in one of my series where it was, like, psychological, like, really psychology, you know, centered, because, you know, it was a fic where Aizawa had autism, and also a fic where we were portrayed with, you know, Aizawa dealing with grief in a different way than Izuku was dealing with grief. But moving on, we have, obviously, Toga, right? Fundamentally, her whole thing, her whole goal in her mind is, I want to be the person I love. I want to become them, right? I want to see them be red. And then we put that into an even deeper level. Okay, all right. She wants to be she wants to turn into the person she loves because people don't love her for who she is. So she's going to turn into something she loves because she knows that someone and something is capable of loving that, right? And in turn, she's hurting the person she loves, right? I feel like the love that she thinks, you know, like, for example, her love for Stain, and in the anime, her love for Deku, is not necessarily, like, actual love. It's conditional love. She loves not the person, but the idea of the person. She loves Stain's idealism in the sense of, okay, he has an idealism that is like, okay, fuck fake heroes, and she could probably relate to it in a sense because of how hero society has wronged her, right? And then she also probably loves how much attention he got, how much love he got from others. So she wanted to follow in his footsteps, right? To become something that other people would love, and to also help a movement that would help others like her. And then we could even go deeper with, like, the Deku, right? Izuku fundamentally is a character that is very, you know, loved by many other characters. Of course, Toga would want to, you know, be like him. It also does not help that their first meeting, their quote-unquote meet cute, was Izuku, like, full out bloody. Obviously, Toga started liking Uraraka as well. I can't exactly pinpoint when she started liking Uraraka. In My Hero Academia main, it is very heavily hinted that Toga has a crush on Uraraka, right? It's, like, super heavily hinted, right? It's not outright said like the Izuku one, but it is heavily hinted. Get your context clues. I studied literature, alright? I was good in English class, but moving on from that, okay, thank you, Echo Bro, for your input. But it has nothing to do with psychology, though. Actually, it has everything to do with psychology, but moving on, get out! As I was saying, Uraraka, give me a second. Uraraka, I'm losing my train of thought. I don't know when Toga started liking Uraraka in My Hero Academia main, but, I don't know if I would say it's well, I mean, I think it's still conditional, unfortunately. As much as I want to believe that in My Hero Academia main, Toga liking Uraraka is unconditional love and not conditional love. Or it's not necessarily like conditional love, but it's like, it's not loving the person, it's loving the idea, right? And I feel like towards the end, right, that end arc, that fight, I feel like that's when it truly became like, oh, I've actually fallen for you as a person. Especially after, Uraraka accepted all of Toga and all that. Actually, I'm doing a bunch of spoilers. I'm saying a bunch of spoilers. Get out of the room. I'm saying a bunch of spoilers, dude. Get out of the room. Alright, now that he's out of the room, right? Toga's sacrifice is like a big thing of like, okay, I want to save you. And for once, not destroy something that I love, right? And you could say like, okay, well that's pretty deep. You can't go deeper than that. Watch me go deeper. Fundamentally, the reason why she's seeking validation elsewhere is because most likely in her childhood, she did not get the validation she needed. She needed validation. And on a deeper level, if Hero Society as a whole did not want to create a Toga, they should have not made it so that there was a society where someone with Toga's quirk, who fundamentally needed blood, right, who has a blood quirk, would not be, stigmatized into being like, oh, that's weird, that's gross, that's horrid, that's a monster, that's a freakish thing to do. Because what did that create? It created a Toga who desperately wanted to become the person she loves, so that in turn, she is loved. Because she knew from a child, as a child, she knew she will not be accepted for who she is. Because she is freakish. She is not accepted for that. So she has to become another person. She has to. There is no other way. According to, the people in her growing up and stuff like that. And, tie that with the whole, sometimes quirks are very much like, I need this. Like in this one, it describes the fact that it feels natural to her. It's a pull. In this fic, quite literally, it is a pull. If her parents wouldn't have been the prick fucking bitches that they are, sorry, I don't like them. I'm not sorry for that. Sorry. No, not sorry. Then she would have gotten not the help that she needed, but the love and support that she needed, right? The love and support that she so desperately needed. But instead, she didn't. Instead, she ended up with the League. Instead, she ended up a villain. But of course, Horikoshi threw that all out through the window and is just like, haha, silly, character who's kind of crazy like, Harley Quinn, but could have a little serious moment. Hee hee haha. Fuck you, Horikoshi. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.